I understand is, sorry, my camera's not on, is it? And it won't come on. Oh yeah, okay, right. No, it's not going to come on. Right. Apologies from Alison Ramsey, who I understand is leaving the pressure. So thanks very much to her for her contribution over the last couple of years. And we've also got apologies from Michael Cowland and Amy Woodward.
I've got two more late ones, Phil as well. It's Ian Green. So Ian Green and Jane Burrows. Sorry, they can't make it today. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Item 2, voting and actions from the last meeting, which have all been circulated. Does anybody have any questions about them? Okay, we'll go on to item 3 then, which is a welcome and introduction to Liz Firmston, who's the Head of Operational Finance Services, and replacing Purnima in this role. Purnima is with us today, so welcome Purnima for coming along, and welcome also to Liz. Do you want to say anything?
Not at this stage, I don't think. Thank you very much. It's nice to be back. I was supporting Schools Forum up until about 5 years ago. I've had a bit of a break, but it's really nice to be back.
Okay, well, welcome back. Thank you very much. Okay, so we've got one matter for decision today, which is the old favourite that comes around at this time every year, which is about de-delegation for next year. So, Brian, I'll ask you to talk about that, please.
Yes, it's the annual bout of consultation we have to do to maintain schools about the de-delegation from the school's budget. We have to do item by item and by each sector, primary and the secondary. So this is only for voting on by maintained schools only. The paper lists all the items that were up for consultation, and it also lists all the results. So overall, we had a slightly better response than we normally have. We actually managed to get over 60% responses, which is quite good. The results are from bottom page 2, paragraph 3 to paragraph 10, I think it is, or 9. The yes votes were continued de-delegation were at least over 75% in all the categories. The highest was 98.4. Of the 7 items we were asking primary schools to consult on, 3 of them were over between 75 and 85, and 4 of them were over the 85% mark. So, you know, quite a good, emphatic response in all cases. We ask you to vote not just as individual representatives of your own school, but also representatives of your sector. So it's we'd like to think that you will take into account the results of the consultation. Before we go on to any of the votes, are there any questions?
Okay, Brian, I think that's fairly straightforward, and I think
it's the usual.
Clear. I mean, obviously, we are representatives and not delegates, so we are voting freely. But we, as Brian quite correctly said, we take account of the information from our sector. Now, we've got no secondary input here, but I understand we have had a late email from our secondary representative to say that they're in favour of de-delegation on all the classes. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, and we'll add that to the minutes to go out.
Right. Okay. So basically, the people voting are the primary maintained schools. Okay. So let's take those in turn, which is free school meals eligibility. So can we indicate all those in favour, please? Raise your hands.
There was 4, I think.
Well, I don't know what happened.
Sorry, Phil. I think.
Okay.
Sorry, Blake. Are you the head of Avon Valley?
Yeah. Yes.
You are. Yeah. You can only vote on the
second
vote, not the first vote. So I think it's 3 actually. Yeah.
Okay. Right. Are there any votes against? Okay. So moving on to English as an additional language for the primary maintained. Can we take those indicate, please? Okay, thank you very much. And trade union facility time. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And school improvement.
See you again.
Thank you. Gypsy and Romany Travellers.
Got 4 now.
Yeah. And SEND support services.
Four again.
Yeah, thank you. And medical referrals. I think that's 4 again.
4 again, yeah, thank you.
So for the secondary sector then. Take my hand down.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
So on some of these, it says that the money is paid directly to primary schools. Does that mean that money comes out of our budget to go to primary schools and it's not available to secondary, or is that same service available to secondary as well?
So which section are you referring to?
For example, the specialist SEND support service, it says money is paid directly to primary schools for pupils that SEND support without an educational healthcare plan, but it doesn't mention secondary.
This is money that is de-delegated from primary schools. So you will receive you because it isn't de-delegated to secondary schools. It's that element is within the school's budget.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, so it's if you think about it, is all the secondary, all these primary school items we've talked about come from the individual schools' budgets for primary schools, and the items for the secondary, what were secondary schools years ago, were the same, and now it's just your own school. And obviously that goes into for some of the items, it goes into a pot, and that helps to provide all the services across the whole sector, across all maintained schools.
Yeah. So, for example, with the SEND support, if we were to de-delegate funding from our budget, would we have access to the same service, or is that only available to primary schools?
It's only available to primary schools because it has been de-delegated. In the past, it's been delegated to yourselves, and once an item is formally delegated, it can't be de-delegated back.
So is there a way that the secondary can access it? I think Blake's is the only school that's maintained. I think that's what he's asking. or because it's just we're quite uniquely in a position where it's one school, so only you have the vote. Either you could vote for yourself to delegate, or I don't know if you could come to a different arrangement outside with just the school to access that service. But in terms of the formal process, delegation takes place either by primary phase or secondary phase. So I think that's what's going on here. That's right, isn't it, Brian?
Yeah. I guess what I'm asking, so for example, if we're giving away that amount of money per pupil, for example, for school to school support, when I've been to the school to school support service before, they kind of didn't really have anything to offer secondary because we're the only secondary school. So it's kind of like, where are we getting value for money out of that?
Yeah.
De-delegation.
The de-delegation money is only coming from primary schools for that service. It is not coming from your service.
Yeah, so you're not paying anything, but because you're in a new situation with being one school, I suppose you might want to arrange something bespoke with the LA if there's things that you want, Blake.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we go through these, Blake, and then you can have your North Korean vote. Right, okay, so free school meals eligibility.
Okay. Do we have to go for each one, or can I just say I vote for all of them?
You can indicate, just tell us which ones.
Just delegate all of them. That's what I did last year. So
yeah. Okay, fine. All right, we'll note that for the minutes. Thank you very much for making that so swift. Well done. All right. So the next few are matters for information and comment, and the update report on the Direct Schools Grant 24-25. Brian, please.
Okay, I will share my screen, so I've got it on there. Make sure I'm getting the right screen up. Okay, so this is the quarter one report, in-year monitoring of all dedicated schools grant at quarter one. You're recommended to note that what the forecast is at period three, quarter one, and the forecasted position for the reserves as at period three in quarter one. I'll just go straight down to the first table, and the first section. That's really just showing how the budget was initially allocated to us by the DFE. 600 million was the original DSG allocation, and then how it's changed between then from basically the first of March, and right up to a few days before the end of June, where we had a change as well. That's mostly to do with the funding for academy schools, the high needs recoupment, as well as an updated census from January for the early years numbers. So at the moment we are forecasting against an allocation of 295 million. Going to table 2, we've split this between the 4 blocks. So you can see the latest allocation is 295 million, and the forecast is in the second from last column, and the important column is really the last column on the right is the variance. So you can see that 2 of the blocks are more or less break even. That's the schools block and the essential services block. Then you have a smallish underspend, relatively small underspend on the early years block, but then there's a very large overspend on the high needs block. Historically we've had to take a report to the DFE and have a DSG recovery plan. We have one of those in place, and we are having meetings with the DFE on a regular basis. There'll be more information later on about no doubt from Ross about our participation in the DBV programme and our own, our own position on how we see that going. Obviously, this overspend is considerably more than we were anticipating, even from the information we that was diagnosed from the diagnostics that Newton and the DBV programme did, which was forecasting about an 18 million overspend this year on the high needs block. Is now, as you can see, over 35 million. If I go down to the reserves table, what that will mean is that if that overall DSG overspend of 34 million, if you include the underspends in there, would mean at the end of the year we'd have an overdrawn reserve of 67 million. Now the local authority, for prudence and due diligence, have tried to have an offset reserve and to keep pace with this. And up until this year, we were able to keep pace with it and have a what we call an offset reserve. But in the current financial climate for local authorities, we won't be able to do that this year, and we're going to have to actually use what's called the override, the statutory override position, to manage the budget. That has implications for us in the sense that, in 2 years' time, when the statutory override ended, we don't know what will happen. Obviously, the new government have said they are looking into it. We won't hear anything this side of April, which is probably when we get the first indications of the spending review. I'll go down to generally on that. Is there any questions on the other blocks or what's happening before I go into a bit more detail on the high needs block?
Well, I think the only thing I was going to say, Brian, is that I think virtually, well, I'm going to say every local authority responsible for education is going to be in that position of having a deficit on high needs and using the statutory override, I guess. Are they not?
Yeah, I think that we've had some indications and some sort of benchmarking data. There are some authorities without a deficit, but they are few and far between. Most do have a deficit, and most have as a percentage larger than Warwickshire's. A lot have no offset reserves, so they have been taking use of the statutory override for a number of years. Yeah, we're no better than we're no worse off than other local authorities, put it this way, but we feel we are in a position where it's getting to the point where we can't top this up with council tax money anymore because of other services within the council. So it's about us taking what other local authorities have done. I don't know if Cam wants to say any more.
Yeah, I think so. Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, Phil. Thank you, Chair. We've never been in this position where we've had to go into this position where we've had to put money to one side or go into putting monies aside and then carry on BAU. It's not how you balance the books normally. And just to say, this is probably the first time we've done it, and demand is high, but equally, what I'm trying to say to you all is this is not a very good position for any council to be in. And those councils that have already been doing it for a number of years with millions of pounds, more so than what we've got, and I won't mention councils, but there are certain which are in multiple hundred millions of, they will be the first to be declaring bankruptcy if the government at some point doesn't resolve this. Now we know that SEND and the demand in SEND is increasing, but equally we know that the money isn't coming down the hill, as fast, and that is what the issue around here is. Equally, legislation needs to change in order to drive some of the factors. So, I'm highlighting it to you as a politician, but also as one of the council leads and cabinet members, that this was a difficult decision to make, and and there are yet more to come. So I'm flagging it. You may, in the next year or so, if the government doesn't make a decision on this, see a lot more councils putting their hands up and waving that they are bankrupt, and it will be because of this sole factor. So whereas we're not there yet, but we are looking at ways of how to manage the demand, and Ross can come into this, and so can Johnny later on, because we are going to talk about SEND further on in the agenda. But I just want to highlight just how important this paper is, and just how significant this high needs block is having an impact on the rest of the organisation. Thanks, Chair, for letting me speak.
But at this stage, Councillor, we're not yet, are we, talking about cutting services in other areas as a result of this deficit in this area, are we?
No, but we are looking at ways of how we can manage our demand in other areas, and how we can save monies already in order to balance our books at the end of February next year for 2025, which is, we're doing the work now basically to make sure that we're balanced.
Okay, thank you.
And there's obviously, Phil, we've actually spent this money in one sense, and that there is a revenue cost to the authority, in the sense that we could have lent this money to a bank, or part of our ongoing proceedings. We would have had interest on that. So there is a cost to it, not just of the actual spend.
Opportunity cost. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks, Brian. Andy Mason, please.
Hi there. It's just a technical question. I understand the offset reserve. Well, what are the statutory overrides? What is that, and what does that allow you to do?
It basically allows us to have a negative reserve that we don't have to offset, but as Warwickshire chose to, we didn't think that was a prudent approach by the government at the time when it was first set in. Nor did the professional body, SIPFA, but it went through, and so we haven't taken advantage of it until this year. We've actually covered it from council tax as a reserve. So it's basically, you've got the overdrawn DSG reserve, and we've got another reserve balancing it, but now we can't. So if all things go ahead as the paper suggests and the forecast suggests, at the end of the year we'll have an 18 million negative net reserve.
So it allows you to buy time in deficit, but you've still got to have a plan to pay that back at some point, or someone's got to bail you out, one or the other, I guess.
Yeah, somebody's got to have a plan somewhere, whether it's us or the DFE.
Yeah.
No, that's fine. I don't envy the situation. I just wanted to clarify. I think it's just buying you some time while you consider what you do, but you still got to deal with the issue. So thank you.
Yeah. Right. Thanks very much. Any more questions on the report, please? Okay. Thank you very much, Brian.
Okay.
Now, the next scheduled item on the agenda is item 7, the estimated schools budget. But Brian, I don't think we've got anything new to say on this yet, have we?
Yeah, I can be very short and sweet on this. As we know, we normally get it in July or late July. Use the indicators to send all schools a rough an indication based on their existing numbers of their school budget. We haven't been able to do that this year because nothing has come because of the general election, and then because of the spending reviews. We've asked the DFE. All we're told is that it will come later in the year. We don't know when. It could. We don't hear anything. It could come tomorrow. On the other hand, it might not come until a local government settlement in November. So we'll have to wait and see. That obviously isn't good for you. It isn't good for us to plan either. So we'll just have to wait. There's only so much we can pester them about it.
Okay, thanks very much for that. We'll wait with bated breath. Right, item 10. academy update. Dalbia, please.
Thank you, Phil. We had 2 academies converted in 1st of September this year, and these are Wilmcote Primary School joined Stowers for a duration, and the second one is St. Nicholas C of E Primary School, Kenilworth. They joined Arden Forest C of E Multi Academy Trust. And that's so far this year, and that we will have some more joining next year. Thank you, Phil.
Okay, thanks very much. We'll note them. Right, okay. Item 11, SEND funding. Ross, please.
Thanks, Phil. A short break and back to SEND funding.
Oh yeah, back to reality.
So I've shared in the paper where we are. I guess just to pick up on the front page of this paper. Hopefully members of Schools Forum remember we went through the Delivering Better Value programme last year, which set out forecasts for the future and our mitigations in terms of how we go forward. I will say mitigations because what it showed was that we wouldn't be able to balance the budget going forward. In 1.2 there's a table and actually what I guess in terms of the overspend this year, it shows that we're in the worst case scenario. So the forecast last year from the DVB gave 6 scenarios, upper bound and lower bound, and a mitigated target and stretch for both of those. So the 6 scenarios, and essentially we wanted to be on the lower bound target mitigated deficit, which would be a cumulative deficit of £50 million by January 2025, and actually what we just reported in terms of the Q1 forecast is we're actually on track at the moment for that upper bound unmitigated is where we are. So we're not having an impact. We are following the worst case scenario at the moment is generally where we are. In terms of the reasons for that, when we looked at the in terms of if you look at the data, what are we seeing? We're seeing more children with EHC plans. That's coming from more requests for children with EHC plans. There's a whole reason, various reasons for that. And I should probably say, I should have said at this point, I'm quite aware that we have a November meeting, which will be solely focused, I think, on, or like to be solely focused on SEND funding as well, and a debate regarding schools block and high needs block. So we'll get into this again then. But in terms of the number of EHC plans, they have increased. So they went up from 5,300 in 2023 to 6,050 in January 2024. They stand today at 6,700 is where we are today. So there's more children in the system. There are more children attending mainstream schools with EHC plans. We've seen more children. We've seen in terms of our state special schools, they're generally full. There are less. There's a handful of places left, and it's almost like a 1-in, 1-out situation. We are looking to expand those, but some of those expansions have been held up with planning and so forth. And in terms of our independent specialist provision use, that has increased significantly. The unit cost, and I never really like talking about children as unit cost, but this is a finance meeting, so that is how we put it. But so the unit cost, the cost of every child with an EHC plan in different settings has increased across all types of settings. So the average cost, the average top up for a child in mainstream school is now over £10,000, approaching £11,000. In independent specialist provision, that has risen significantly to £66,000, and we have more children in independent specialist provision than we did a year ago and 2 years ago. So those are where the pressures are coming from. Our mitigations really haven't had time yet since the 1st of April to have a significant impact. The main mitigation that we have, and we looked at this over a 5-year period, was to open more resource provisions, to fund resource provisions. I'm delighted to say that we've had 7 resource provisions open in September, plus 1 at a college as well. I think we've also increased places at a number of resource provisions as well, and we are in discussion with a number of schools about opening for September 25 and September 26. So that remains the key part of our strategy. If we are going to get anywhere near the targets that we set ourselves, the resource provision kind of strategy has to work. I think I've put in here 62% of the cost avoidance to be made is through the resource provision model. That does require, though, support from schools and head teachers across the county to make that work. In terms of the other areas, I've given the updates on the inclusion framework, our workforce development programme, and the digital infrastructure. They are long term. They're looking more at kind of maintaining places in maintaining places in mainstream schools at SEN support, or maintaining places at schools with EHC plans. And then they were never expected to have an effect by this point. I think the last thing just to note is, which isn't particularly in there, but I'll refer to as well, is the top-up funding rollout that we've done as well. So we have tried to, part of our strategy is to try and make sure that we are equipping mainstream schools with the right resources at the first time of our asking. So we've been rolling out for children with new EHC plans and in different year groups, particularly as they transfer across year 6 to year 7, year 2 to year 3, and into reception. We are applying a new top-up matrix to try and get away from costed individual education plans, which took a lot of time of SENCOs and of our SENDAR team. And so what we have seen from that is we are seeing higher allocations to mainstream schools as a result of that. I just mentioned it's gone up to almost 11,000, but we're also seeing, in terms of placement stability, when we look at last year's year 7 cohort compared to the year before, last year we saw 22% of children move on to other schools. In the year after that had an EHC plan. The year just gone, it was just 8%. So we are seeing more kind of maintaining placements in mainstream schools. There'll be a number of stories behind that, I'm sure, but that's part of our strategy. If we fund mainstream schools better, we think we'll get better outcomes. Perhaps the last thing to say before I bring Johnny in as well, that I haven't mentioned, but you will have perhaps spotted in the forecast earlier, the spend on alternative provision is significantly over the budget that we have. I think there are reasons for that, but we're almost approaching 3 million spend now on alternative provision, and there remains to be, I think, that's an area where we want to make sure we are getting value for money from that alternative provision. I know my colleague Matt Biggs and Andrew McFarlane are working particularly on that area to improve supporting that place. Okay.
Thanks, Ross. I'll bring Johnny in then, and then we'll go for questions. Johnny.
Yeah, there's not much to add from me. I mean, I said it last time that the resource provision is a major strategy. It's also, in terms of the forecasts and the work that we did with the DFE, it was also the one that's the most highly impactful in terms of I'm not going to say savings, or cost reduction, prevention, if you like, so that young people have got a place to go rather than go straight from mainstream provision to a specialist provision. And so it's pleasing to see that that's our most successful area at the moment. With that, it's that we are opening up a number this year. We're on track. Just as an insight, it looks like the direction of travel nationally is that young people will be expected to be in mainstream and be supported in mainstream. So I suppose the schools that will benefit from that are ones that would have a resource provision. Nonetheless, if they don't have a resource provision, they would, there'd be other ways to support them. So it feels like it's the right strategy. I think we're ahead of the game on that anyway, because that was our intention anyway. But just signalling out there that it feels like the direction of travel is young people will be expected to be in mainstream. So all positive, all good. So I'll open for any questions now, Phil.
Okay, thanks, Johnny. So in terms, Ross, of the gap between the state-funded special provision and independent specialist position, is the high cost of the independent specialist provision directly related to the, I guess, higher needs of those children? Or is there an element of market shortage here, in that a price can be charged because there's a shortage of provision?
So it's more the latter in terms of the so we are having to place at more expensive placements, and kind of market competition is kind of coming into that as well, or market rates are going in. So essentially, what we, if I went back even just a couple of years ago when we redid all our panels, considering requests for specialist provision, we'd be looking at about 20 requests per fortnight. We'd be getting lots of offers of places, whether that be from our own special schools, where there's still some capacity, or from a number of independent specialist provisions, and we'd be able to choose the independent specialist provision at the lowest cost that we thought was still appropriate for the child. Where we are now is we've exhausted, I guess, a number of the lower cost independent specialist provisions, so we're having to go further away. You'll have also seen other local authorities use our special school places and independent specialist provision in our area. So actually, higher costs for a place are being requested. We're now it's about 40 decisions a fortnight we have to make rather than 20, and that's pushing the average price up.
Okay, thanks very much. And finally from me, I understand there's been a delay in the delivery of the Talenton Academy, the Specialist Provision Academy. Is that going to have a significant effect on our costs going over the next 6 months or so?
Johnny, do you want to come in on that one?
This is Talenton, yeah.
Yeah, this is the AP free school for those who aren't clear. So this is a special school. It's an AP free school.
At the moment, we've got no idea. They're talking about 2026 now. No groundwork has been broken. We're waiting for the outcome. We don't even know where it sits in terms of priority for the new government, in terms of either the free school agenda or where to put that school. So it's all up in the air a bit at the moment. It's largely to do with the cost of it, and the cost have risen. So I think the DfE are in negotiations around that, which has contributed to the delay. It all depends, Phil, how the landscape goes. If schools across the county, if we see the trend of exclusions continuing to rise, then absolutely it will have an impact, because at the moment we're paying other private providers, if you like, quite a premium for housing young people in alternative provision, while we then try to reintegrate them. So the idea behind the new school would be that we could not obviously be more cost effective, but actually a better provision as well. So what we're doing as an LA is we're trying to, we've got an AP strategy, which we're working with schools on, and we're trying to look at potential alternative models, such as smaller hubs, some schools potentially hosting AP, whether it's their own AP on their own site, or that could include other young people from other areas. Or we've got a project going on in the north of the county at secondary level called the Pod, where we've got a number of schools together, and it's a separate building, and we've commissioned the same people that would have run Talenton Academy to run that for us as a small alternative provision area. So we might need to pursue other forms of alternative provision for young people. So we'll have to monitor it, I suppose, is what we'll say, but we can bring that back here.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much indeed. Right, Rebecca Harrison, please.
Hi. I just want to say we are one of the schools that have opened our SRP, and it's really successful. We were approached last November and we launched in September. So to any school that's out there that hasn't done it, it is definitely achievable within 12 months and seems to be a success. We've got 4 pupils here already and we'll be growing over the next 2 years. So definitely recommend doing it. But certainly looking on your figures, it looks as though all the SRPs that are opening are all the communication, when we desperately need some of the social emotional. So that would be good going forward if that comes off. I think the other point is I've been on school forums for too many years now, and it's the same conversations where all the money is being spent in independent or on the transport, and it doesn't seem to be changing. And I know having these SRPs is the way forward and is going to help, but it just feels like it's been a long time that we're having the same conversations. And I think the comment made about, are we going to be cutting services through council taxes to fund the overspend, probably later on, but it's definitely going to hit our bank balances, because we're going to be having that 0.5% top size taken off us, whether we agree to it or not, like happened last year. And then that affects my budget and the service I'm providing to my children. So it's impacting everyone. So it's really difficult. So please try and find me some more savings.
Thanks, Rebecca. Right, Andy Mason, please.
Hi there. Yeah, understand the strategy moving, keeping students in mainstream schools. What's the difference between a not resourced and a resource provision? And if a school's considering it, what do we need to do? And what is the obligation on the school? Because I'm not aware that we've considered it. I might be wrong, but we've seen a massive increase in the HCPs and AP provision this year for our students. So the cost to us has been significant. But I don't know whether there's ability for us to become a resource provision or not.
If I just respond to that,
yes, please, Ross.
I'm tentative now in what I say. We've got a few resource provision heads on the call. I don't want to. It's not easy, Andy. But what we tried to do is so happy to have a conversation with you further about it. I won't be able to go through all of it now. But essentially, you get place funding of £10,000 and then top up funding depending on the need between kind of £10,000 and £12,000. So it's meant to pay for itself. The places are paid for in advance. One significant difference is the admissions come through the council's high needs panel rather than through the usual kind of admissions gateway. But what we really tried to do more recently, because I think like Rebecca, I've been on here a few years and we've been talking about resource provision for a few years. What we've tried to do more in our last kind of round is talk to schools to say, how do we build this up so that you're not overwhelmed, and how do we get multiple schools to come forward at once so that you don't feel like a kind of a proxy special school in that area. So that's the things we've talked about. For secondary schools, that can be building it up from year 7, 8 and go from there, because actually if you open a resource provision and you're taking in year 10s, you'll just feel you're taking in all the next door schools, children with EHC plans. And so how do we build it with you? How do we identify children who are currently in your school who would be appropriate for that? We have our own discussion about what that is, but we're working with the schools to do that. So Andy, that's probably about as far as I'll go now in terms of everyone's time, but more than happy to follow that up with your school.
Okay, yeah, if you can fire something over to us and maybe we can set up some time. I don't know whether I'm talking off the top of my head, obviously. I don't know what my colleagues feel about it, but if we can help, I can see the dilemma, but we're happy to consider things. Thanks, Ross.
Thanks, Andy. Brian, do you want to come in now or at the end?
I'll come in at the end if Gillian's
that's fine.
Want to speak about this point.
Yeah, Jill Bowser, please.
Hi, just to carry on the resource provision comment, Stocking Forward runs 2 provisions, one for CNI and one is an SEMH one. And actually the way that the local authority worked with us for the second provision, which was the SEMH, where we had a high number of children who were suitable for that sort of provision in our own school community, really enabled the success of that base, because it allowed us to have children who understood the context of the school already. We deployed staff from within, so they understood how the school ran already, and then we've tagged in children around the outside of that over a more considered time frame as and when the base settled. I would be fibbing to say it's straightforward and easy, because of course it isn't, because these are highly complicated children and there is a risk around reputation about you being the school who looks after that type of child. However, the benefits outweigh all of that, and I would highly recommend it to any teacher. So if ever there's anybody who wants to come and have a look at either CNI or SEMH, we'd be more than happy to show people around.
Thank
Jill.
You.
Good. Phil, can I just come back on that? Firstly, just a thank you to Jill for for saying that. That wasn't prompted in any way. So I really thank yourself and Rebecca for that.
I'm not that well behaved, Ross.
No. I think one thing I just want to emphasize, there might be a feeling here of some of the comments to say, okay, does that just mean there's no kind of saving involved because actually you're just moving children who are in the mainstream school into resource provision? But we're trying to take a long view, a 5-year view, so that actually, when we're looking, this isn't, Rebecca, in your school, the first children that's benefit, those who are in your school. Then we're looking a little bit wider, but actually you're in a junior school. It's Parkhill Juniors, isn't it? Which is the one, and so next year's year twos are the ones who are really going to benefit from that. Who you don't know yet, but it's almost planned for the year ahead. And as I mentioned, the same with kind of secondaries and so forth. So the idea is not to say we've got loads of children now who need a resource provision, where can we put them this year? It's actually to say over the next 5 years we're going to need this, so how do we build something together?
Thank you for that. Next I've got Alan Wheel, but you're not Alan Wheel. Just remind me what your name is.
I'm Sarah Bromley from
Thank you, Sarah. I should have remembered that. Carry on.
I know we're all struggling to deliver for children with SEND across the board, but in early years, the funding that we get, our inclusion grant funding, is absolutely minuscule, like even in relation to what schools are getting. Even of a child with an EHCP already, when we're doing a lot of the work early on from a very young age to get them that EHCP plan in place, ready for schools. Last year I had one, and we typically get £1,000 for the whole year, and it's a little bit irksome to see an underspend in early years in the special needs area as well. And it says in the DSG report that that's because of staff vacancies. And it's, we're talking a small amount in comparison to the high needs block, but £356,000. I hope that doesn't remain the case, and it would be really nice to see it being spent on children who need it in the early years. That's it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sarah. If I got,
Brian, go on, Ross, and I'll bring Brian in.
Yeah, if I can cover. So in terms of that is for the IDS team. I think the recruitment's underway. We were actually trying to work at the beginning. We kind of thought there was some extra funding agreed via Schools Forum. It came through, and we thought we'd just be investing in specialist teachers. We actually think a mixture of specialist teachers and inclusion mentors is the better way to go, to have more people providing that kind of advice and support. I think the other thing to say is, and it's hidden a little bit in what's there, in terms of our cost centres for children with EHC plans, that comes from the that comes from the high needs block. And I've actually started, and it may be for a future report, we do this to show how much high needs funding is actually going into the early years sector for those with the EHC plans, and how much isn't, because it's just all in there as in mainstream. You're actually under that mainstream schools bit. So I think it would be helpful to show perhaps next time just one level down in terms of that data. And the last thing to say is, and I know this only covers a small number, but we have engaged with the early years sector in terms of particularly with the nursery schools about what they're doing, and trying to make some hubs from the nursery schools. But we know that goes wider as well. Said Sarah, that we know they don't have provision across the county. It's kind of down the spine of the county. So
yeah, I think last time you said it was like one place per nursery school, and there's 6 nursery schools. Is that still the case?
We worked with the nursery school heads to share out what they look like. And I think Nikki's on the call, and we worked it out, so we felt it was appropriate, and we can come back and I think it's 2, but building up to 6 in time is where we get to. So it's a progressive model. But for now, we felt that works well to test it for the first year, make sure we get the value for money from that. But I acknowledge this isn't just a schools issue. There's an early years issue. There's a post-16 issue as well. But you're right to bring attention to that early years sector as well.
Thanks. And yeah, it would be great to have a bit more detailed data so that we can see it separated. I think I'm here always banging the drum for early years. Yeah. So more information would be helpful. Thanks, Ross.
I'll get Brian on that for the next school.
Thank you.
Right. There's nothing else to bring Brian to sum up. Brian, thank you. Comment.
Yeah, Ross answered the question quite well about what the underspend, the 306,000 underspend. So recruitment delays in that. We also, we're unsure with all of the early years because the new provision this year. We're really unsure of all the budgets. We still don't know what the take up for the under twos is going to be like at all. So we've been probably been cautious this year, and we'll obviously we will try and get out as much to early years sector as possible within the early years block. A quick answer. I did some quick maths when Ross was talking about and your question, Phil, about the overspend on and the high spend on the independent special places. The budget is 8.9 million overspent for those places. 5.8 million of that is due to price increases, and the 3.1 is due to the actual numbers of units, number of children coming through the system. Sorry about that. So that's the sort of, you're talking sort of 2/3, 1/3. 2/3 is because of price, and that's price increases on new packages and existing packages.
Okay, yeah, very interesting there, Brian. Thank you very much. Right, is there anything else on this report? Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 12 then, which is forward plan. Dalbia?
Thank you, Phil. Yeah, the next meeting is on 7th of November, and we will bring the results of the consultation to Schools Forum. And this meeting is going to be in person at Shire Hall. So close to the time, I will send the directions out to School Forum members as well, and they will have the opportunity to meet each other face to face. And the meeting after that on 16th of January 2025, there will be 3 papers for decision and 2 for comments and information. Thank you, Phil.
Okay, thanks very much. Note that. Right, I don't have anything else, I don't think. Just remind everybody, the next meeting is the 7th of November. We will be meeting in person to talk about the 0.5% transfer. This is always a popular and interesting discussion. So we'll be bringing our hard hats and bring your rotten tomatoes along, and we can have a free and frank exchange of opinions about that, and encourage those of you that have received consultations to fill them in and return them, because the more information we get back from schools, it obviously informs our discussion. Johnny?
So Phil, just to add, the consultation is, we just want to be far clearer this year to assure schools what the money is being used for, so that there's no suggestion that the money is being used just because because there's a deficit and but it's being used very specifically for resource provision to support the resource provision strategy, amongst other things, but primarily that. And last year, although I know we went for a disapplication, but I did have some conversations with heads afterwards that said, if I was able to hear you speak, when she was talking about me, about what we were using the money for, I might have voted differently, or I would have voted differently, she said. And so I think a mixture of people understanding exactly what that money is being used for, and the wider community of schools voting for it, rather than the lower turnout that we've seen in the past. But hopefully we can start here with Schools Forum. You've just heard a number of heads. We promise you it's unprompted, as Ross has said, have talked about the resource provision. But just to be clear, resource provision doesn't just benefit the schools that have it. It benefits everybody, because what it means is that there's somewhere for the young people to go within that area, and things are being shared out. And young people can still definitely be supported in a mainstream school without a resource provision. But that school would be taking young people from across the county, so it does benefit your school. it benefits every school. And I think that's really, we really want to make sure that that message goes out there so that schools know exactly what they're voting for. I totally understand how schools voted last year, and I think that was probably partly our fault in not getting that communication, you know, as succinct as we could. But starting with this forum that will be voting on it, if you could spread the word as well, because you'll understand the consultation, speak to your consortia, speak to your area leads, and really press the case for it, because that extra money is going to have such a big impact for our young people as well. And we'll keep doing that and spreading that message in our forums as well. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Johnny. Yeah, I very much encourage everyone to respond to that consultation and to come along to the meeting on the 7th of November. It'll be great to see you all in person once a year. It's one of the most important discussions that we have as a school forum during our year. So I look forward to seeing as many of you as possible on the 7th of November in Old Shire Hall. Okay. So with that, I will close the meeting. Thank you all very much for your time today, and look forward to seeing you on the 7th of November. Thank you very much indeed. Cheers.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Phil.
Thanks, Val.
Okay.